The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, the infamous classic treatise on the cutthroat nature of politics and statecraft. So, this book and its author likely need no introduction. Its influence has been enormous, whether for good or ill. But on the off chance that you are unfamiliar, for the sake of thoroughness, Niccolo Machiavelli was an Italian politician who wrote this book, The Prince, I believe, while spending time in basically exile. And he wrote it, I think, to ingratiate himself pretty much with the ruling Medici regime. The work takes the form of an epistle addressed to Lorenzo de' Medici, in which Machiavelli basically says, look, I've been around politics for a hot minute. I know the ins and outs of the game. I know the rules. And also, I've studied history. I not only know about politics contemporaneously, but also politics historically. I know a thing or two. And basically, here is what I have learned. Here's what I have figured out. Here is what the game looks like as I see it. And hopefully, my advice can aid you in your political endeavors. And the advice that the book gives is quite striking, and what has made it so infamous is because there are no moral considerations at all in this. It is unscrupulously, ruthlessly pragmatic. What Machiavelli did was essentially to divorce politics from ethics, and that is perhaps, not so shocking nowadays, and largely probably because of this book. But for the time, this was pretty daring, I think it would be safe to say. Like, classical, like ancient, I suppose, political theorists such as like Aristotle, perhaps, often strove to like try to formulate political theories based around, ethical ideals, try to formulate a just society, and, lay out rules that, rulers themselves would have to abide by, try to make society function in a way that, is again ethical to an extent. But Machiavelli was like, no, no, there's no place for principles in politics. This is pretty much, I think, you could probably say, the dawn of realpolitik, because again, there's just no moral considerations in this at all. The advice which the book gives is basically just like do whatever is necessary to secure power for yourself, to keep yourself on top. Lie, cheat, and steal. Do whatever you have to. Don't keep your word if it's not expedient. Be dishonest. Don't be afraid to stab people in the back. And also some kind of like tactical advice, such as don't place your faith in mercenary soldiers, like, sellswords, because soldiers whose only allegiance is to money are not going to get you very far, because they will be very apt to abandon you, whereas soldiers who are like, actual soldiers from your country, or who, live the life of a soldier for, more than just money, they're more reliable than, again, mercenaries. And also, try to make yourself loved and feared by the populace if you can. But if you have to choose one, always choose fear. It is better to be feared than loved if you have to make that choice. Don't be afraid to rule with an iron fist if you have to. And also, like, don't be profligate with state funds, because people generally balk at increases in taxation. So, be responsible with the finances, but all for expediency's sake. Again, none of this has any kind of moral consideration to it. It is 100% pragmatic. And again, reading this book for me was not terribly shocking. And I think that is because of the extent of this book's influence. Because there are certain works that by the time you get around to reading them, and honestly, I'm really surprised that it took me this long to read The Prince. But like I say, there are certain works that by the time you get around to reading them, they are already so cliched. They have already saturated the culture to such an extent that they're just not shocking anymore. So reading this for me, I mean, it was basically just like turning on the news. Like there's nothing new here. Like politics is a ruthless cutthroat business. There are no morals, and that is really apparent. I think nowadays, especially because I have to say, reading The Prince now, right around the time that the all that stuff about the Epstein files has come out. I mean, perfect timing, literally just perfect timing, because that only reinforces what Machiavelli was laying down hundreds of years ago, that there is no place for morals or principles or ideals in politics. It is a cutthroat, ruthless, and ultimately pragmatic game. But like I say, this wasn't terribly shocking for me because again, we live kind of in the age of realpolitik, where we don't expect our political figures to have morals. As horrible as that sounds, again, now after all the crap that has come out with like the Epstein debacle, we definitely know that like no one, or almost no one anyway, in politics has clean hands. It is not a game that you play without getting some dirt on you. Pretty much that's pretty much just the iron law of it. But for the time, this book was pretty shocking, even though, as I'm given to understand it, the influence of this book did not begin to pick up until quite a bit of time had passed after it was written. In fact, it kind of went over poorly, it seems, when this book was initially written, because as it is explained in the afterword to this edition, Machiavelli presented this to Lorenzo de Medici. He was like, "Here is my gift to you. I'm trying to help you. These are the laws of power as discovered by me. May it help you in your endeavors." And apparently Medici was like, "What do I want with a book, nerd? Yeah, I don't even want this." It did not go over well. It didn't really stick the landing like Machiavelli apparently thought it would. But it eventually went on to have immense influence, and so many political figures embody this type of thinking. I think Hitler, as I'm given to understand it, Hitler read this and apparently kind of lived by it. Its influence has been very profound, very palpable. But once again, for the time, this was a pretty daring enterprise, and it was so audacious, apparently, that Machiavelli was actually placed on the Catholic Church's index of prohibited books because, again, for the time, the complete divorce of politics from ethics was again a pretty daring and audacious enterprise. But I think that the main takeaway when reading The Prince is perhaps that good men do not normally make the best politicians or the best national leaders, and that it takes bad men to do what's necessary to make a state function effectively. And, there have definitely been instances in history where, there are the occasional odd politician that actually does have some kind of moral compass, but it generally makes them be very inefficient politicians. And I might point to like Grover Cleveland, the U.S. President Grover Cleveland, as an example of this. Grover Cleveland's stalwart adherence to the principles of classical liberalism, such as as demonstrated by his refusal to redistribute wealth in the form of relief payments, as well as his staunch fidelity to gold in the face of rising economic populism as embodied in figures such as William Jennings Bryan made him very, very, very unpopular by the time he left office. Well, I mean, he was already in his second term, I believe, but there was not going to be another one, even if he wasn't. It essentially destroyed his reputation, but he adhered to some kind of principle there, and that is why, for those of us who value principles, and for those of us who value the principles of classical liberalism, even though Grover Cleveland is often kind of regarded as like this middling, forgettable president that a lot of people probably are largely unfamiliar with, he actually is on a moral level, on the level of principle, one of the greatest United States presidents. And he is one of the very few, and I mean very few, men to ever occupy that office who one can say is a genuinely and truly respectable man. But again, it did not serve him well politically because he ended up being wildly unpopular because of his adherence to principles. Whereas, contrast Grover Cleveland with Franklin Roosevelt, a man who was pretty much totally amoral, who had no scruples about anything, but who is often regarded as one of the greatest of United States presidents, even though he is possibly the most despicable man to ever occupy the office, and that's really saying something. But you see in the contrast there the kind of message that Machiavelli is putting forth in The Prince. That good men who actually do have some kind of allegiance to principle, don't really make good politicians. Whereas men who have no principles at all, who have no scruples at all, who have no morals at all, oftentimes make the most effective leaders because they'll do whatever it takes. And so this is a book that I think, even though it's very sad to say, it has aged like fine wine because this doesn't go away. This doesn't change. Politics is, well, politics. We know what it is. We know how it is. We know the lamentable way that it is. We know the nastiness of it, the dirtiness of it. We know the nastiness and dirtiness of the people who are involved in it. And like I say, this book will probably never not be relevant. It is truly one for the ages, and that's very sad to say once again because this is not a book that one should look at and be like, yeah, this is what we should be like. This is much more of a descriptive work than it is a prescriptive work in a way. And Machiavelli, I would point out, is actually pretty upfront about that. And this is a thing that I think a lot of readers should take to heart or take into account when going into The Prince, is that Machiavelli himself is not necessarily a villain. Some certain figures, I think it was Leo Strauss, who called Machiavelli a teacher of evil. Maybe you can, if you're looking at it one way, but Machiavelli, once again, he's not really saying that this is the way that politics and statecraft should be ideally. He's really only saying that this is the way it is. And he's not, and again, he doesn't disregard the existence of morals or ethics or principles. And he actually says this in this section here, which pretty much sums up the mentality of the work pretty well and succinctly. Machiavelli writes, "But my intention being to write something of use to those who understand, it appears to me more proper to go to the real truth of the matter than to its imagination. And many have imagined republics and principalities which have never been seen or known to exist in reality. For how we live is so far removed from how we ought to live, that he who abandons what is done for what ought to be done will rather learn to bring about his own ruin than his preservation. A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to grief among so many who are not good. Therefore, it is necessary for a prince who wishes to maintain himself to learn how not to be good and to use this knowledge and not use it according to the necessity of the case. Again, Machiavelli really isn't arguing that politics should be this way. He's only saying this is the way it is. This is how it is, and if you want to succeed in the game of politics, these are the rules you have to play by. And again, it's lamentable and it's sad, but it is what it is ultimately. And so I don't know that I would really subscribe to the view of Machiavelli as this like devious, villainous figure, even though his name, because of this work, has become a pejorative term used to denote a kind of political schemer. I don't really know that I would subscribe to that view of him. He was just laying it out like he was just calling it like he saw it. That's all he was doing. And the fact that this book, basically inaugurated the notion of realpolitik, that it basically blew the doors off and again, if effectively divorced politics from any notions of ethics. It's lamentable, but it is what it is. That's all I can say. It is what it is. So I don't rate works like this, even though this, in terms of how much I like what it says, I would probably not rate this very highly. But in terms of the accuracy of what it says, it would get pretty high marks. But like I say, I don't really rate works such as this. But I will say, it was an important read, I'll say, even though it really wasn't all that enjoyable. Personally, I found it pretty dry because nowadays reading The Prince, you're not seeing anything new. It's pretty much just run of the mill commonplace stuff now. But I am glad I read it. So yeah, The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. Have you read The Prince? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read The Prince, you might want to read this. It's probably not going to shock you like it apparently once had the ability to do. It's pretty just like commonplace stuff at this point. But still, you might want to read it, just to see where it all began, perhaps, to see where it was first set down and formulated. It might be worth a read. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.